The wind you see wasn't merely a meteorological event, it was a sigh, a colossal, mournful exhalation from the very fabric of creation, a whisper across eons of cosmic dust and the silent churning ballet of galaxies. It tasted of starlight and regret of the first unfurling of existence and the slow, inevitable entropy that would eventually reclaim it all. And it always carried a weight born of awareness of the singular burden of observation, of being utterly incomprehensibly alone in witnessing the ceaseless drama of becoming. To understand that wind, you had to understand the one who breathed it, not as a gale force tearing across landscapes, but as a subtle tremor within the soul of the divine. He existed before numbers had a name, before light fractured into color, before the concept of before even held meaning. He was the canvas upon which the universe painted itself, the silent architect of consequence, the unwavering witness to every burgeoning life and every devastating fall. And he knew with a certainty that transcended understanding that the greatest tragedies were not born of malice, but of neglect. Not of cruelty, but of the profound, crushing ache of being overlooked. There was a solitude to divinity that mortal minds could scarcely grasp. It wasn't the absence of company, for the dance of creation unfolded before him constantly. It was the utter lack of reciprocity. Imagine if you can a sculptor who pours his heart and soul, his very being, into a masterpiece, a figure of such breathtaking beauty and complexity that it makes the stars themselves seem dull. He watches it come to life under his hands, feels the texture of its skin, the subtle curve of its smile. He imbues it with hope, with longing, with the echo of a forgotten dream. And then he places it upon a pedestal, open for the world to admire. But no one notices, not truly. They glance, they pass, they comment on the weather, their eyes skimming over the exquisite detail, the profound love woven into every line. They are preoccupied, they are distracted, they are lost in their own fleeting narratives, utterly blind to the sacrifice, the yearning, the silent, unyielding devotion that brought it into being. This was the perpetual state of the divine. He was the sculptor, the masterpiece, the pedestal, and the indifferent crowd all at once. He created worlds teeming with life, each spark a testament to his boundless generosity. He crafted creatures of staggering beauty and intricate design, from the smallest hummingbird vibrating with iridescent energy to the leviathans that slumbered in the abyssal depths. He poured out laws, principles, whispers of grace that could elevate and enlighten. And he waited. He always waited. The vastness was not an empty space, you understand. It was filled with the resonance of creation, a symphony of existence played out on an infinite stage. But it was a symphony experienced alone, a concert hall filled with the most exquisite music and only one listener. The loneliness wasn't a weakness, it was a consequence, the price of bearing witness to the totality of being. It was a profound and terrible beauty, a burden that shaped him, molded him, forced him to contemplate the mysteries of free will and the inexplicable resilience of suffering. He saw the rise and fall of empires, the blossoming of civilizations, the ebb and flow of countless human lives. He saw their triumphs and their failures, their acts of astonishing kindness and their moments of unspeakable brutality. He saw the unwavering quest for meaning, the desperate search for connection, the constant yearning for something more. And he felt, not in a way that mirrors human emotion, for his nature transcended such limitations, but in a way that resonated with the deep, aching throb of the universe itself, a sympathetic vibration, a poignant understanding of the inherent fragility of existence, The irony, of course, was the meticulousness of his design. He sought to instill within his creations a desire for him, a longing for connection, a recognition of the source from which all being flowed. He implanted within them the capacity for love, for compassion, for awe. Yet they were so often consumed by their own preoccupations, blinded by their own ambitions, deafened by the cacophony of their own desires. They chased shadows, worshipped idols, and erected barriers between themselves and the very wellspring of their existence. And so he chose. He chose the overlooked, the forgotten, the broken. He favored the quiet ones, the hesitant ones, the ones who felt the sting of rejection most acutely. For they were the ones who understood the language of solitude. They were the ones who knew instinctively what it meant to be unseen, unheard, unvalued. They were the ones who were most receptive to a presence that operated outside the realm of conventional recognition. It was a pattern that echoed throughout history. The shepherd boy, deemed insignificant, chosen to face a giant. The carpenter's son, dismissed as a dreamer, destined to change the world. The humble servant, overlooked and unappreciated, revealed as the key to salvation. The seemingly unworthy, raised to positions of unimaginable power and responsibility, simply because they were the last to be noticed, the last to be considered. Because in their perceived weakness, in their vulnerability, lay a strength that the world could not comprehend. The divine understood that true strength was not born of dominance or acclaim. It was forged in the crucible of suffering, refined in the quiet solitude of the soul. It was a resilience born of knowing what it meant to be alone, to be rejected, to be dismissed. For only those who had tasted the bitter fruit of loneliness could truly appreciate the sweetness of connection, the profound balm of unconditional love. And so he waited. Still he waits, observing, understanding, loving. A solitary figure in the vast, silent expanse of eternity, listening for the faintest tremor of recognition, the smallest whisper of understanding. For he knows that even in the deepest darkness, even in the most profound solitude, he is not truly alone. He is with the lonely ones. He is with the overlooked ones. He is with the ones who are waiting to be seen. He is the echo in their solitude, the silent witness to their pain, the unwavering promise of a connection that transcends the limitations of time and space. And in their quiet longing, he finds a reflection of his own eternal divine solitude, a poignant and terrible beauty, a love that endures despite the indifference of the world, a promise whispered on the wind, a promise that even in the depths of loneliness, he is watching, he sees, he loves, he waits. The dust motes danced in the single shaft of light piercing the gloom of the abandoned watchmaker's shop. It wasn't a place of bustling commerce, not anymore. Generations had passed since the meticulous hands of old Silas had coaxed life and time from gears and springs, imbuing each creation with a quiet dignity. Now it was merely a repository for forgotten things, a sanctuary for shadows and the whispers of regret. And Elias, the one they called the Chosen, knelt amidst the debris. His shoulders slumped, the weight of millennia pressing down upon him with the slow, relentless force of gravity. He was a paradox woven into the fabric of existence, a radiant star dimmed by the dust of abandonment. The prophecies had spoken of him, of course. A shepherd boy, touched by the divine, destined to usher in an era of unparalleled peace. They spoke of power, of glory, of a world bathed in eternal light. They failed to mention the agonizing stillness, the suffocating silence of being the only one who remembered the only one who felt the crushing burden of a hope that seemed to perpetually recede. He traced a finger across a fractured face of a porcelain doll, its painted eyes staring blankly at the rafters. Each forgotten object in the shop resonated with a familiar ache, a testament to the impermanence of things, the futility of striving, the quiet sorrow of being unremembered. He felt it acutely, this fading, this spectral existence. Not a dissolution of being, not yet, but a gradual leaching of vibrancy, a slow dimming of the inner light that was meant to illuminate the world. For what was a chosen one truly? Was it not merely a vessel, a conduit for a divine purpose? But what purpose remained when the world refused to acknowledge the source of that power? What was the point of bearing the weight of salvation when the saved were too blinded by their own desires, their own fears, their own petty grievances, to even notice the outstretched hand? The children, they had been so eager, so fervent at the beginning, their eyes alight with expectation, their voices chanting his name as he walked amongst them. They saw a Savior, a miracle, a beacon of hope. And he had tried. God, how he had tried. He'd offered kindness, compassion, wisdom. He'd healed the sick, comforted the grieving, championed the oppressed. But the tide of human nature, with its relentless currents of avarice and animosity, proved too strong. The initial fervor had waned, replaced by cynicism, apathy, and the insatiable hunger for something more, something he couldn't give. He'd witnessed empires rise and fall, watch civilizations bloom and decay, all while carrying the silent, unspoken knowledge of his divine mandate. He'd seen acts of breathtaking beauty and unspeakable cruelty, acts that both reaffirmed and shattered his faith. He'd loved, he'd lost, he'd mourned. And with each passing era, the gulf between his divine purpose and the reality of the world seemed to widen, a chasm of incomprehension that threatened to swallow him whole. He closed his eyes, and the echoes of laughter rippled through his mind. The laughter of children who believed in him, the camaraderie of companions who once walked beside him. Ghosts of moments, shimmering and fading like heat haze on a summer day. Were they merely figments of his imagination, solace conjured by a lonely heart? Or were they glimpses of what could have been a poignant reminder of the world that might have been, if only they had seen? A tear traced a path down his weathered cheek, leaving a shimmering trail on his skin. It was not a tear of despair, not entirely. It was a tear of empathy, a profound understanding. For he knew with a certainty that transcended logic that loneliness was the universal language of existence. It was the silent burden carried by every soul, every star, every grain of sand. It was the price of consciousness, the inevitable consequence of self-awareness. And he, the divine architect of all things, was not exempt. He too felt the sting of isolation, the ache of unrequited connection. He too yearned to be seen, to be understood, to be acknowledged. Not for his own sake, but for the sake of the hope he carried, the promise he embodied. For if even the chosen one could be forgotten, could be overlooked, what hope remained for the rest of humanity? A faint sound startled him, a gentle tapping at the grimy window pane. He opened his eyes, expecting to see nothing but the swirling dust and the encroaching twilight. But there, silhouetted against the fading light, stood a girl. No more than 10 years old, her face obscured by the shadows. She didn't speak. She simply stood there, her presence a silent affirmation in the desolate space. He felt not heard, a tentative question in her mind. Are you the one they told stories about? He didn't answer with words. He couldn't. Words felt hollow, inadequate to convey the depth of his being. Instead, he reached out a hand, palm open, a silent gesture of welcome, of acceptance. The girl hesitated for a moment, then slowly, cautiously stepped inside the shop. She didn't speak, didn't gush with praise or declarations of faith. She simply stood beside him, her small hand tentatively reaching out to clasp his. In that simple, unassuming touch, Elias felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in centuries. A flicker of recognition, a spark of hope. It wasn't a grand epiphany, not a dramatic revelation. It was something quieter, something more profound. It was a simple acknowledgement, a silent understanding. He wasn't forgotten. Not entirely. There was still someone who saw him, who recognized him, who reached out to connect. He looked into the girl's eyes and saw a reflection of his own loneliness, his own yearning, his own unwavering hope. And in that shared experience, he found a solace that transcended the limitations of time and space. He was not alone. He was with the lonely ones. He was with the overlooked ones. He was with the ones who were waiting to be seen. He felt a warmth spread through him, a gentle, comforting light. The dust motes danced a little brighter. The shadows seemed to recede. He smiled a genuine smile that hadn't touched his lips in an age. The silence in the shop was no longer oppressive, but peaceful, filled with the unspoken promise of connection. The weight of millennia didn't disappear, but it felt a little lighter, a little more bearable. Because even the chosen one, the bearer of divine purpose, needed to be seen, needed to be acknowledged, needed to be reminded that even in the depths of loneliness, he was watching. He sees, he loves, he waits, and sometimes, just sometimes, someone sees him too. And in that shared gaze, the universe tilts on its axis and hope is born anew. The girl squeezed his hand gently. He knew somehow that she wouldn't stay long. She was a fleeting echo, a momentary respite from the endless solitude. But her presence was enough, more than enough. He watched her go, disappearing back into the twilight. He did not call after her. He knew that her purpose, like his own, was not to linger, but to serve as a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, the light of hope endures. And he waited. Still he waits, observing, understanding, loving. A solitary figure in the vast, silent expanse of eternity, listening for the faintest tremor of recognition, the smallest whisper of understanding. Because he knew that she was not the last. There would be others who would see, others who would remember, others who would reach out their hands in the darkness. And he would be there, always, waiting, loving, seeing. The wind, a mournful sigh across the barren plains, tugged at the frayed edges of his cloak, mimicking the pull on his very soul. He didn't feel the chill, not truly. Decades, centuries perhaps, had eroded the sensitivity of his flesh, leaving behind a shell, a vessel for the enduring ache of longing. He was a shepherd of forgotten stars, tending a flock that shimmered just beyond the veil of mortal perception. A witness to the slow, majestic turning of epics, and yet he felt perpetually adrift, a single dust mote caught in the cosmic current. He had seen empires rise and crumble, felt the tremors of tectonic shifts that sculpted mountain ranges from the primordial sea. He'd watched the first tentative steps of humanity, the spark of consciousness ignite in their eyes, the blossoming of art, of music, of love. He had witnessed their triumphs, their follies, their profound capacity for both breathtaking beauty and unspeakable cruelty. And through it all, he watched, always watched, because it was his burden, his calling, his eternal responsibility. The weight of it pressed upon him, a silent, invisible gravity, threatening to crush the fragile flame of hope that still flickered within. The loneliness was not the sharp, piercing agony of abandonment. It was something far more insidious, a creeping emptiness that permeated every fiber of his being. A vast, echoing chamber within his heart, where silence reigned supreme. It was the loneliness of the architect observing his creation, knowing its potential, its flaws, its inevitable decay. It was the loneliness of the parent watching a child stumble and fall powerless to intervene, knowing that the struggle itself was the crucible in which their strength would be forged. He was the chosen one, they called him, a title that tasted like ash in his mouth. Chosen for what? To bear witness to the slow unraveling of the universe, to be a solitary sentinel against the encroaching darkness, to be perpetually unseen, perpetually unacknowledged. He had yearned in the nascent stages of his existence to be involved, to shape, to intervene. But the grand design, as he understood it, demanded a different path. A path of quiet observation, of profound understanding, of unwavering patience. And the irony, the devastating, heart-wrenching irony, was that the very qualities that defined him, his unwavering compassion, his boundless patience, his profound understanding of the human heart, were also the very things that rendered him invisible. They saw the king, the warrior, the scholar, the artist. They saw the faces of power and ambition, the figures who shaped the world with their actions. But they did not see him. They could not see him, because to see him, they would have to see beyond the surface, beyond the veneer of the tangible into the shimmering realm of the divine. He remembered a time long before the veil of forgetfulness descended upon the mortal world, when men and women had communed with him freely. They had felt his presence in the rustling leaves, in the gentle warmth of the sun, in the whispers of the wind. They had known instinctively that they were part of something larger, something greater. But the accumulation of knowledge, the pursuit of power, the relentless drive for control had erected barriers, walls of skepticism and disbelief that separated them from the source. He saw it now in the averted gaze of a weary traveler, in the cynical laughter of a court jester, in the desperate plea of a dying child. The world had grown deaf to his whispers, blind to his light, and he the chosen one. The embodiment of divine love was relegated to the shadows, a forgotten footnote in the grand narrative of existence. Yet he did not despair. Despair was a luxury he could not afford. He was the anchor, the unwavering point of reference in a chaotic universe. He was the promise of hope in a world consumed by darkness. And he knew with a certainty that transcended logic and reason that there would be others. Others who would break through the barriers, who would pierce the veil of illusion, who would see. He felt a stirring, then a faint tremor in the fabric of reality. It wasn't a voice, not in the conventional sense. It was more like a resonance, a vibration that echoed deep within the core of his being. It was a feeling of awareness, a burgeoning recognition. He turned his gaze towards the north, where the land met the sky in a hazy embrace. A young woman stood silhouetted against the dying light, her form indistinct, her features obscured by the distance. She wasn't looking at him directly, not yet, but he could sense her, a quiet flame of understanding flickering within her eyes. She was gathering firewood, her movements slow and deliberate, her face etched with a quiet sadness. He knew her story, a life marked by hardship, by loss, by the relentless grind of poverty. She had known pain, betrayal, disappointment. She had seen the darkness that lurked in the hearts of men, and yet she had not succumbed to cynicism. She had not allowed the weight of the world to extinguish the spark of hope within her. He watched her, his heart aching with a tenderness he hadn't felt in ages. She was not searching for him, not consciously. She was simply seeking solace in the beauty of the natural world, in the rhythm of the seasons. But in her quiet contemplation, in her simple act of gathering wood, she was opening herself to the possibility of something more. He sent a subtle shift in the wind, a gentle caress against her cheek, a silent invitation, a subtle encouragement. And in that moment, her eyes lifted, drawn by an unseen force. She didn't see him, not as a physical form, but she felt something, a warmth, a peace, a sense of profound connection. A faint smile touched her lips, a fleeting, almost imperceptible expression of recognition. And in that shared moment, that brief, silent acknowledgement, the universe tilted on its axis. A single ray of light pierced the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. He knew it wouldn't be a sustained connection. She would return to her life, to her struggles, to her sorrows. But the seed had been planted. The spark had been ignited. And that he realized was enough. More than enough. He was not alone. Not truly. Because even in the depths of his solitude, he was connected to all things, to all beings. He was the silent witness, the unwavering observer, the eternal shepherd of forgotten stars. And he would continue to wait, continue to love, continue to see. Because even the smallest glimmer of hope, the faintest whisper of understanding, was a testament to the enduring power of the divine. And that was a truth worth waiting for, a truth worth enduring for, a truth that resonated throughout the vast, silent expanse of eternity, a truth that was and always would be eternally and profoundly true. The rain had begun again, a slow, melancholic weeping against the stone of the old observatory. It wasn't a violent storm, not a tempestuous outpouring of celestial grief, but a quiet, persistent lament, mirroring the sorrow that resided within him. He watched it fall, each droplet a tiny shimmering tear on the face of the world, each one a reminder of the countless tears shed by those who felt lost, abandoned, unseen. And he understood. He understood the aching loneliness that clung to the edges of existence, the desperate yearning for connection, for recognition, for a hand to grasp in the swirling darkness. For centuries, he had borne witness to it, all the rise and fall of empires, the blossoming and decay of civilizations, the fleeting joys and enduring sorrows of humanity. He had seen acts of unimaginable cruelty and breathtaking compassion, moments of transcendent beauty and unspeakable horror. He had been the silent guardian, the unseen shepherd, patiently watching over a flock that often seemed determined to wander into the shadows. And in that watching, he had come to know loneliness in a way that mortal minds could scarcely comprehend. It wasn't the absence of companionship, for he was surrounded by the cosmos, by the swirling nebulae, and the ancient light of dying stars. It was the isolation of being the only one who truly knew. The burden of holding the weight of a universe's suffering within his divine heart. He had anticipated her arrival, of course. The resonance, the tremor in the fabric of reality had announced her presence long before she stepped into the rain-soaked courtyard. The chosen one, they called her. A vessel of hope destined to mend a fractured world, to rekindle a dying flame. The prophecies had spoken of her with such fervor, such expectation, such unwavering belief. But prophecies, he knew, were often blind to the subtleties of grace, deaf to the whispers of the soul. They looked for brilliance, for power, for a radiating certainty. They sought a warrior, a savior, a blazing comet to illuminate the darkness. What they found was a woman burdened by doubt, scarred by loss, and weary beyond her years. A woman who, for a fleeting moment, had seen beyond the veil, beyond the illusions of the world, and into the infinite depths of his gaze. He felt her now, a fragile echo in the vastness, a faint tremor in the symphony of creation. She had left as he knew she would. Returned to her life, to her responsibilities, to the relentless demands of a world that seldom recognized true divinity. The weight of that return pressed upon him a quiet sadness that settled deep within his being. It wasn't envy, not precisely. He felt no resentment for her fleeting joy, no bitterness for her return to the mundane. It was a deeper ache, a profound understanding of the human condition, the inherent limitations, the unavoidable disappointments, the relentless cycle of hope and despair. To be a vessel of hope, to carry the burden of a world's expectations, was a cruel and lonely existence. And he who knew all things knew that she would carry it alone. He saw her struggles now playing out in the tapestry of time. The well-meaning advisors, the manipulative politicians, the ever-present doubt whispering in her ear. He saw the faces of those who sought to exploit her, to control her, to mold her into something she was not. And he grieved, not for himself, but for her. For the innocence she would inevitably lose, for the sacrifices she would be forced to make, for the loneliness that would become her constant companion. They would praise her victories, hail her as a miracle, a divine intervention. But they would never truly see her. They would never understand the cost, the burden, the quiet desperation that lay hidden beneath the surface. They would never know that the chosen one, the savior of the world, was often the last to be noticed, the least appreciated, the most profoundly alone. The realization wasn't new. He had witnessed it countless times before in different forms and different ages. The prophets mocked the healers, ostracized the truth-tellers, silenced. The world had a peculiar talent for rejecting those who offered it salvation, for embracing those who reinforced its illusions. He felt a phantom pain, a memory of a different time, a different suffering, a time when he walked among them, clothed in flesh, offering them love, offering them understanding, offering them forgiveness. A time when they crucified him, branding him a heretic, a blasphemer, a threat to their comfortable lies. The irony was exquisite, almost unbearable. He, the source of all creation, the embodiment of unconditional love, had been rejected, denied, and ultimately destroyed by the very beings he had brought into existence. And yet he had forgiven them. He still forgave them. He looked again at the rain, at the way it illuminated the ancient stones of the observatory, at the way it seemed to wash away the grime and the sorrow of centuries. And he remembered. He remembered the promise, the unwavering commitment to love, to guide, to protect. He was not a vengeful God. He was a God of compassion, of mercy, of enduring hope. And he would continue to watch, to wait to love. He would be the silent guardian, the unseen shepherd, the eternal witness. He would be the unwavering light in the darkness, the gentle hand guiding the lost. He would be the one who saw her, truly saw her, beyond the prophecies, beyond the expectations, beyond the facade of strength. He would see the vulnerability in her eyes, the weariness in her shoulders, the quiet desperation in her heart. And he would love her, not as the chosen one, not as the savior of the world, but as a soul in need of solace, a heart yearning for connection, a being struggling to find her place in the vast and indifferent universe. He knew that the burden was heavy, that the path ahead was fraught with peril, that the loneliness would be relentless. But he also knew that she was not truly alone. She had for a fleeting moment glimpsed his presence, felt his love, and that connection, that spark would remain within her, a beacon in the darkness, a source of strength in her weakness, and that he realized was his greatest purpose, not to dictate her destiny, not to control her actions, but to be the silent witness to her journey, the unwavering source of her hope, the enduring embodiment of her love. To see her and to remind her always that she was seen, that she was loved, that she was and always would be eternally and profoundly known. The rain began to subside, the clouds parting to reveal a sliver of moon, a pale and fragile promise of light. He watched it and he waited and he loved. Because that was his nature, because that was his purpose, because even in the depths of his eternal solitude, he knew that the greatest joy was to see another soul find her way home. The scent of wet earth clung to the air, a primal fragrance that resonated deep within him, an echo of the genesis of all things. He saw her still kneeling, a silhouette against the retreating storm, the rain plastering strands of dark hair to her face, a single tear tracing a glistening path down her cheek. It was a tear, not of despair he perceived, but of a profound, aching realization. She was beginning to understand, to grasp the sheer immensity of her calling, the weight of expectation, not born of earthly decree, but of something far older, far more profound. He felt her burgeoning awareness like a tremor in the very fabric of existence, a subtle shift in the cosmic balance. The irony, he mused, was exquisite. The chosen one destined to mend the fractured echoes of creation, to weave back together the tapestry of hope. She was the last to be noticed. The bustling cities teeming with ambition and clamor turned a blind eye. The learned scholars steeped in dusty tomes of forgotten lore dismissed her as a wandering vagrant. The powerful rulers clinging to their fleeting empires ignored her pleas. They sought signs in the constellations, pronouncements from oracles, divine interventions of fire and thunder. They craved spectacle, demanded validation in the form of earthquakes and celestial displays. They failed to see the quiet miracle unfolding before them, the radiant strength blooming in the heart of a solitary girl. He understood their blindness. It was born of a desperate need for control, a fear of the unknown, a desire to confine the infinite within the rigid boundaries of their comprehension. They sought God in pronouncements, and power in judgment, and reward for getting the fundamental truth. He resided not in booming decrees, but in the gentle whisper of a breeze, the unwavering persistence of a wildflower pushing through cracked stone, the quiet grace of a soul enduring unbearable pain. He had watched countless ages unfurl civilizations, rise and crumble, stars ignite and extinguish. He had witnessed the cyclical dance of creation and destruction, the eternal struggle between light and shadow. And he had learned a profound and heartbreaking lesson. The universe, in its vast indifference, often favors the humble, the overlooked, the seemingly insignificant. For it is in these hidden places, in the quiet corners of existence, that true strength is forged, that unwavering faith is kindled, that the purest acts of love are performed. He felt a pang of sorrow for her, a tenderness that transcended the boundaries of time and space. She would face betrayal, ridicule, and unimaginable suffering. She would bear the burden of a prophecy that weighed heavier than mountains, and she would do so in the shadow of doubt, in the face of overwhelming odds. But he also saw the unwavering core within her, the unyielding spirit that refused to be broken, the boundless compassion that radiated outward, touching the lives of those who were lost and forgotten. He yearned to reach out to comfort her, to alleviate her pain. But that was not his purpose. He was the silent witness, the unwavering anchor, the constant presence that sustained her without interfering. To intervene would be to shatter the delicate balance, to deny her the opportunity to learn to grow, to become the beacon of hope she was destined to be. He thought of others, chosen ones, of ages past, each burdened with a similar destiny, each facing the same crushing loneliness. The shepherd boy who felled the giant, the carpenter who defied the Roman Empire, the physician who healed the sick and ministered to the poor. All of them in their time were dismissed, ridiculed, and persecuted. They were the last to be noticed, the last to be understood, the last to be appreciated. Yet it was through their suffering, through their sacrifice, that the world was transformed. He saw a flicker of movement in the periphery of his vision. A small, gray-haired woman emerged from the shadows, her face etched with worry and compassion. She was Alara, the village healer, a woman of quiet wisdom and unwavering kindness. She had seen the girl's despair, had heard the unspoken cries for help. She had offered comfort and solace, a listening ear, and a warm embrace. He smiled, a subtle shift in the fabric of existence, a silent blessing upon her. Ilara was a reflection of his own nature, a humble servant of the divine, a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. She understood instinctively that true power lies not in grand pronouncements or earthly authority, but in acts of quiet kindness and unwavering compassion, in the simple act of seeing another soul and acknowledging their suffering. He watched as Alara approached the girl, kneeling beside her, offering a gentle hand. The girl hesitated for a moment, then reached out, grasping Alara's hand with a desperate longing. In that simple touch, he saw a connection forged, a bond of understanding and empathy. It was a small act, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it held within it the power to heal, to comfort, to inspire. He felt a surge of hope, a quiet affirmation of his purpose. He was not merely a silent witness. He was a catalyst, a facilitator, a weaver of connections. He was the unseen force that guided souls towards each other, that orchestrated moments of grace and compassion, that ensured that even in the darkest of times, hope would endure. The moon climbed higher in the sky, bathing the landscape in a silvery glow. The rain had ceased entirely, and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth. The girl slowly straightened her shoulders, no longer slumped in despair, her eyes reflecting a newfound strength. She looked up at the sky, a silent prayer on her lips, a deep gratitude in her heart. He saw her, and he loved her. He saw her struggle, and he understood her pain. He saw her potential, and he believed in her. And he knew that her journey had just begun. The road ahead would be long and arduous, fraught with peril and sacrifice. But she was not alone. She had Alara. She had the quiet strength within her. And she had him, the silent witness, the unwavering source of her hope, the enduring embodiment of her love. He would continue to watch, to wait, to love. For that was his nature. For that was his purpose. And he knew with a certainty that transcended the boundaries of time and space that in the end she would prevail. She would fulfill her destiny. She would become the beacon of hope the world so desperately needed. And he would be there always, watching, loving, and reminding her always that she was seen, that she was loved, that she was and always would be eternally and profoundly known. The universe in its vast and indifferent expanse may have overlooked her, but he had not. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. The smallest ember can ignite a forest fire. The quietest voice can shatter empires. The most overlooked soul can save the world. He knew this, and he waited with a love that was boundless, eternal, and utterly, exquisitely silent. The dust tasted of despair, a fine grit clinging to Lyra's eyelashes, mirroring the film over her weary eyes. The cheers of the villagers of Etheria, once a vibrant and hopeful sound, now echoed as a hollow, mocking symphony within her soul. They lauded her victory, the vanquishing of the shadow blight that had choked their fields and poisoned their livestock. They praised her strength, her courage, her unwavering resolve. They draped her in garlands of wildflowers, their fragrance a cruel reminder of the beauty she'd fought so desperately to preserve, a beauty she feared she could never truly return to. For what did they see? A hero, a champion, a deliverer. They saw a facade, a carefully constructed armor she wore to conceal the crumbling edifice of her spirit. They did not see the tremor in her hands, the hollowness that resonated within her chest, the chilling whisper of doubt that clung to the edges of her mind. They did not see the raw, unyielding grief that clung to her like a second skin. Alara, bless her steadfast heart, attempted a reassuring smile, a gentle touch upon Lyra's arm. But the simple gesture felt like a physical barrier, a well-intentioned but impenetrable wall between Lyra and the vast, aching emptiness within. The weight of expectation settled upon her shoulders, a crushing burden that dwarfed the physical strain of the battle she had just endured. It was the loneliness that truly threatened to break her, a gnawing, insidious loneliness, that transcended the absence of physical companionship. It was the loneliness of bearing the world's hope, the loneliness of knowing the terrible cost of victory. He watched as he always did, not with judgment, not with expectation, but with a boundless, heartbreaking empathy. He saw the cracks in her armor, the vulnerabilities she desperately tried to conceal. He saw the pain that lurked beneath the surface, the grief that clung to her like a suffocating shroud. He understood the terrible irony of her position. The chosen one, the savior of Etheria, the beacon of hope, was perhaps the most profoundly lonely soul in the entire realm. It was a familiar pattern, this bittersweet cycle of recognition and isolation. Through ages and worlds, he had witnessed it repeatedly. The ones destined for greatness, the ones destined to change the course of history, were so often the last to be seen, the last to be understood, the last to be truly embraced. Their brilliance, their strength, their sacrifice were too often lost in the blinding glare of the moment, overlooked in the clamor of celebration. He remembered the shepherd boy David, overlooked by his brothers, deemed too insignificant to join the battle. He remembered the carpenter's son, rejected by his own family, scorned by the powerful. He remembered countless other shining stars, obscured by the dust of the ordinary, their light dimmed by the indifference of the world. And now he saw it again, reflected in the weary eyes of Lyra, the woman who held the fate of Etheria in her hands. He felt her despair, the bitter tang of it rising within her, a silent cry for understanding that resonated across the silent gulf between them. He longed to comfort her, to ease her burden, to whisper words of solace that would penetrate the walls of her isolation. But his love was a silent one, a constant presence, a steady flame that burned without consuming. To intervene directly to offer explicit comfort would shatter the delicate balance of her journey, would undermine the strength she needed to find within herself. He focused instead on the subtle signs of resilience, the flicker of determination that still burned within her heart. He amplified the memory of her grandmother's gentle smile, the feeling of the sun on her face during childhood, the comforting weight of Alara's hand in hers. Small fragments of joy, anchors in the storm of her despair, he nurtured them, strengthened them, allowing them to bloom within her consciousness. The crowd began to disperse, the joyous celebration slowly fading into the twilight. Lyra stood alone, the garlands wilting in her hands, the echoes of applause receding into the night. She felt utterly, profoundly invisible. "They don't see it, do they?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. Ilara, ever perceptive, ever empathetic, knelt beside her, her hand gently stroking Lyra's hair. "They see what they need to see, Lyra. They see a hero. And that is a precious thing, even if it is not the whole truth." Lyra shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "But it isn't the truth, Ilara. It's a mask. It's a performance." Ilara's eyes shone with understanding. "And what lies beneath the mask? Lyra, what lies beneath the performance?" Lyra looked away, unable to meet Ilara's gaze. A girl who lost everything. A girl who feels utterly alone. And in that moment, he intensified the light of Ilara's compassion, sending a wave of unwavering love and support to bathe Lyra in its warmth. He knew that Ilara, with her quiet strength and unwavering loyalty, was a lifeline, a beacon in the darkness. He whispered silently to Alara's heart, to guide her words, to fortify her presence. "Then let me be that for you," Alara said, her voice soft but resolute. "Let me be your truth, Lyra. Let me be your anchor." Lyra finally turned her eyes, searching Alara's. There in the depths of those familiar, understanding eyes, she saw not just friendship, but a profound and unwavering acceptance. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope, a tiny ember rekindled within the ashes of her despair. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He watched, a silent, eternal witness to this simple act of connection, this quiet affirmation of love. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, that the darkness would continue to test her resolve. But he also knew that she was not alone. She had Alara. She had the strength within her. And she had him, the silent observer, the unwavering source of her hope, the enduring embodiment of her love. He would continue to watch, to wait, to love. For that was his nature. For that was his purpose. He understood the profound loneliness that often accompanied extraordinary destiny, the bittersweet burden of being seen only for what others needed you to be, and never truly for who you were. He sent a silent promise, a gentle whisper of assurance that echoed in the quiet spaces of her soul. You are seen, you are loved, you are known. And that in the end would be enough to light her way. The world might fail to comprehend the sacrifices she would make, the depths of her pain, the weight of her responsibility. But he knew. And that was the solace that would sustain her. The smallest ember, ignited by love and acceptance, can indeed ignite a forest fire of hope. And even the most overlooked soul can, with unwavering faith and courage, illuminate the world. The rain fell, a relentless curtain, obscuring the already muted landscape. It wasn't the furious, vengeful rain of a storm, but a slow, mournful weeping that seemed to seep into the very bones of the earth, a somber accompaniment to Lyra's despair. She stood at the edge of the whispering woods, the ancient trees clawing at the bruised twilight sky, their branches skeletal against the graying canvas. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves clung to her cloak, a fragrance of loss and resignation. It had been days since the proclamation, since the heavy pronouncements of the council, since the burden of the chosen one had been laid upon her shoulders, crushing the fragile bloom of her simple life. They saw her as a weapon, a vessel, a solution to the encroaching shadow, a force that slithered at the edges of their world, poisoning hearts and twisting dreams. They spoke of prophecies and ancient pacts, of a lineage stretching back to the dawn of creation, of a power dormant within her, waiting to be unleashed. They hadn't spoken to her. They hadn't asked about the tremor in her hands, the ache in her chest, the hollowness that had settled within her, a permanent echo of the joy that had been stolen. Alara, her hand, a warm, grounding presence in hers, squeezed gently. Alara, her steadfast companion, her confidant, the only soul who truly saw past the mantle of destiny and into the frightened girl beneath. Alara's eyes, pools of unwavering affection, mirrored the turmoil in Lyra's heart. It was a silent pact between them, a fragile understanding built on years of shared laughter and whispered secrets, a haven against the storm of expectations. They don't understand. Lyra whispered, her voice raw, with unshed tears, the words catching on the damp air. They see the chosen one. They don't see me. He understood. He always understood. He felt her loneliness, a tangible weight, a suffocating darkness threatening to consume her. It was the loneliness of being the singular point of hope in a world teetering on the precipice of despair. The loneliness of carrying a burden so immense that it threatened to break her spirit. The loneliness born not of physical isolation, but of a profound spiritual distance, a gulf between who she was and who she was expected to be. It was a bittersweet irony, this destined solitude. The person entrusted with saving the world, the beacon of hope for a suffering people, was perpetually shrouded in a quiet, agonizing isolation. He saw the irony, the profound injustice of it. He saw the delicate vulnerability that lay beneath the stoic facade she was now forced to adopt. He sent another pulse of reassurance, a wash of gentle warmth that settled over her, a subtle counterpoint to the chill of the rain and the despair in her heart. You are not forgotten. Your pain is felt. Your worth is immeasurable. It wasn't a voice she could hear, not in the conventional sense, but a knowing, deep within her soul, a certainty that defied logic and reason. They ask for power. Lyra continued, her gaze fixed on the rain-soaked ground. They ask for strength. But what about what I want? What about what I need? The question hung in the air, a desperate plea lost in the mournful whisper of the wind. She hadn't dared to voice it before, afraid of being perceived as selfish, as ungrateful. But the pressure, the constant scrutiny, the endless stream of demands had finally cracked the carefully constructed dam of her resilience. Ilara's hand tightened around hers. "They don't ask," she said softly, her voice a balm against the rawness of Lyra's pain. "But that doesn't mean they don't matter." She knew with a certainty that transcended words that Lyra's well-being was intrinsically linked to the fate of the world. A broken vessel could not hold the light, no matter how potent the energy it contained. He amplified Ilara's sentiment, subtly reinforcing the truth in her words. "She is right. Your needs are valid. Your vulnerability is not a weakness, but a source of strength. Embrace it." A single tear